my name is Brian, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar on how to create a culture that attracts top talent and helps retain the talented folks you already have. First off, let me give you a little background on Mosconi Group. Today's multi-channel, multicultural world has changed the way customers buy. Mosconi Group helps your organization turn this into a competitive advantage. They specialize in building internal employee skills, changing behaviors, and achieving measurable results for organizations interested in creating a sustainable, customer-focused organization. If you ever find yourself frustrated by employee productivity or frustrated by sales productivity, Mosconi Group can help change that. Our presenter today is Jeff Morris, and he has 25+ years experience in marketing and mapping the customer experience. He's a serial entrepreneur. He founded his first company in 2002. And he's a corporate speaker, widely respected for his skills understanding the psychology behind why your customers buy and how your customers can help you to sell. He's also currently working on a book entitled Storytelling: How to Close Sales Through the Power of Customer Experience Stories. And that's going to be the topic of his next webinar. But today he's going to be talking about the changing landscape of employee engagement. And so, Jeff, I'm going to throw it to you.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Good afternoon. I'm so glad you're able to join us today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I really appreciate that. Please feel free to use the messaging function as we go along to ask questions along the way. And also, if you haven't already, take the time to download the worksheet that we'll be reviewing here in a bit. We're going to talk about it during this process, but if you don't get it downloaded beforehand, that's fine as well. Or if you need me to email it to you, I'll have my email address up here momentarily as well. So first, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be reviewing today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the myths of employee engagement, the things that we still believe in this day and age that drive employee motivation, how to more effectively measure your own employee engagement, how to use customer experience methods to attract, hire, and retain top talent, and how to create accountable employees and efficient teams, and basically improve productivity. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the 5 steps of creating what we call an entrepreneurial team, employees that have that entrepreneurial spirit, if you will. Why are we here? So before we even talk about the myths of employee engagement, let's talk about the ugly truth. According to the Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends study of 25,000+ organizations, one of the biggest challenges being faced is retention and engagement. And this is rated by 78% of business leaders as either urgent or important in this study. We've even heard it ourselves. The HR leadership I've spoken to consistently expresses their concerns about attracting, recruiting, retaining top people, because they realize that as the economy improves, key talent will actually seek their own personal job improvements, usually with one of your competitors. So why has this number continued to climb? What's different today? Are these employees really unhappy, really that unhappy? It's interesting because I often see people use the term unhappy with whether or not employees are engaged. It's really not about being happy. It's really about, they're 2 different things. If they feel like they are making a difference within the organization, it's not about happiness, it's really more about engagement. However, the grass is always greener with access to the internet, right? So if you've seen any of our webinars on customer experience, we talk about the fundamental shift in our world and our lifestyles. Since the 90s, when we entered the information age through the internet and its connectivity, everything has changed. The balance of our life and work, where we work, how we learn, even in the way we interact with companies and brands. The internet has really changed the dynamics. Today's multi-channel world offers your customers more choices while empowering them with these third-party insights into your products or services through online sources. But guess what? Your workforce has experienced these exact same shifts. They have unprecedented access to information about companies and their corporate cultures overall, as well as unlimited access to finding new jobs. So here are some things that just think about as we go through this topic today. Work overall has changed. As the borders between work and life blur, and just to go back for a second, you see that really the hours worked in 2014 are whenever. I mean, we ourselves have virtual employees, and they work whenever they can. They work in the middle of the night. They work early in the morning. It's not necessarily a 9 to 5 type of situation. But work has changed. So as these borders between work and life blur due to this technology communications changes, people are looking for more meaning, a more balanced work-life situation, and the opportunity to grow and better themselves. Brands or companies that are perceived as having a mission and a quote-unquote soul are attractive to talents, especially younger generation. The employees you have with the highest potential are more demanding with higher expectations of the corporation overall. For example, we've adapted our hiring assessments. I don't know how many of you use hiring assessments, but they're online surveys, quizzes, basically, that assess talents. We've actually adapted ours and our interview questions that we provide our clients to ways to identify those employees who are more demanding. But your culture can actually help attract that type of employee. You want that type of employee. Mobility is on the rise. Notwithstanding the political agenda behind Obamacare, it has dramatically reduced one key obstacle for job change. Employees can now more safely change jobs. They don't have to worry about things like benefits, as an example. Expect to see these really with rare skills like software engineers or biological engineers as they begin to migrate more often. It's easier to shop the job markets. Just as the internet has made it easier for customers to find information and competitive pricing for products and services, the same's been applied to the job market. There are literally hundreds of job search sites out there, and the interesting thing is that they run off of a lot of the same databases. But it's easier to find jobs, learn about companies, apply for a job, and yes, even competitively shop jobs or competitively shop availables or companies that are available out there. So, and then the last thing is social media. Really, social media has provided a transparency for folks who are looking for a new opportunity. We could actually go as far as suggesting that social media could be one of the top influencers or influences on whether you can actually attract the best talent or whether your talent perceives something better in the market. It offers a more transparent look into corporate cultures. While you can control the content on your corporate social media sites, you cannot control your employees' profiles. And many of your best employees regularly see into their peers' workplaces through these type of profiles. So it's important to think about your culture. Does your culture stand out? Today, if a company is not delivering compelling customer experience, they can expect to see customer attrition. In many cases, that attrition is not even deliberate. The customer you don't even enter into their selection set anymore. The same could actually be said for a company's work experience. If it's not compelling, your best talent will seek new opportunities, potentially leaving you hobbled as an organization, because guess who they're leaving behind, right? The folks that aren't as high performers. And then since the world of the internet unfairly favors the negative stories, the stress and added workload for those who are left behind could actually create a false read of your culture on social media, making it increasingly difficult to attract quality candidates. It can kind of create a vicious cycle overall. So let's talk about the myths of engagement. So the first one is money, right? Money is important. It's important to all employees. Anyone who says it's not important is not paying attention, right? But even with all the books written about employee engagement, all the speakers that are out there, this still continues to be the most persuasive method of motivation is money. Now, don't get me wrong, it's important, but listen to this little experiment that we did. So one of our clients has not given a raise in nearly 5 years. he does give bonuses based on performance and if revenues top a certain number overall for the company. The raises are really no longer part of this equation. In fact, he only gives raises based on two things: the market and performance. There are no more cost of living raises. We do a salary survey for him every year, and if any single salary within his organization is out of whack, he'll give that person a raise. But other than that, there's no cost of living, quote unquote, raises. Usually he tries to bring them up into the top of that salary range versus the middle, because then it takes salary out of the equation completely. It takes money out of the equation. So the second thing that he does is someone has dedicated the time to learn a new skill or develop a new process for the company or to take on additional responsibilities that technically don't fit their job description, they'll be given a raise. Those are the only two reasons that he gives raises. As Daniel Pink points out in his book Drive, I don't know if you've read it, but the Drive, the Surprising Truth about what motivates us. He says, as long as pay is consistent with your industry, money drops in importance as a motivator for engagement. Incremental changes in income has no significant impact on engagement, especially in skilled positions. Simon Sinek points out that there are only two ways to influence human behavior: through manipulation or through inspiration. Advertising, I've been in the advertising industry, and it's taught us that manipulation, like a price reduction or an added feature with no true benefit, really results in incremental changes, but not a long-term commitment. Manipulating the purchase of the sale price doesn't necessarily equate repeat purchases or customer loyalty. Well, financially incentivizing employees has the same effect. It creates short-term engagement, but it really lacks the long-term commitment. So here's the client that we're talking about. This is what he does in his company instead of raises to drive engagement. Career opportunities. He provides everyone with training and education and always promotes from within, unless he absolutely cannot, unless it's a role that just cannot be filled. Performance management. He makes certain that his management team receives constant leadership training and creates a culture that encourages employees and managers to express criticism if they need to, with the provision that they're prepared to work on solutions rather than just complain. He really works hard on his organization's reputation. In addition to those employee growth opportunities through training, he makes sure that his organization has a great reputation overall. The company gives back to the community. If his employees aren't talking about what a great place it is to work, he really feels that he has a problem to fix. Recognition. He regularly and openly recognizes achievements, not just when they receive a compliment for a customer, as an example, but even at times when employees have demonstrated a great teamwork or flexibility or helped out a coworker with a project, and he does this on a regular basis. In fact, he does a weekly recognition and a monthly kind of employee of the month type of program. And then communication. He gives everyone a very clear message of the goals of the organization, but more importantly, what their role is in those goals, the goals that they need to achieve to contribute to the greater good. So what we're going to do here for just a second is grade your own organization on one of these things. This is that worksheet that you can download, but we're going to do it right here on screen. So here's the question, and what I want you to do is grade your organization on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 means that this is not true at all for your organization, and 10 means it's true for every employee in your organization. Are your employees improvement oriented, all of them? So just think about that. Where do you fall on that scale overall? And again, you can use the worksheet later and kind of think through all of the questions that we're going to talk about today. So the second myth, it's not worth the effort. It's really a myth that employee engagement offers little return on investment. Gallup's State of the American Workplace study, this is a study that they do, I don't know if they do it every year, but every other year at least. It points out that 52% of your employees are disengaged overall. And 18% are what they call actively disengaged. It means that they've actually taken action and they're looking really for a new position. And a lot of times they're doing that on your dime. So that means that there's only about 30% of your workforce that's engaged, 1/3. So overall, worse yet, Gallup data goes on to show that the last group, the actively disengaged, actually costs U.S. businesses like yours about 28% of your revenues. Or to translate it into direct costs, a McLean & Company study shows that disengagement could be costing you an estimated $3,400 per $10,000 on your payroll. So you can do the math there. That's a pretty hefty number. So that alone is pretty good rate of return. I'd like to get 28% growth on an investment, right? And given that true engagement doesn't necessarily derive from additional financial gain, the costs for this return are actually relatively low. It's a commitment, but the hard costs are relatively low. When employees are engaged, they treat the company as their own, and they treat your customers as their own. So according to a Burson Associates study, organizations that invest in engagement programs actually enjoy an increased customer spending. So it makes sense, right? Treat your employees well, they treat your customers well, and you end up with an amazing customer experience. Loyal customers spend more, they refer more new customers, there's a lot more referrals, and those kinds of things are happening. And then you'll see in this Gallup poll, it actually shows that many areas that employee engagement really affects your bottom line in a lot of areas. I'm not sure how many of you are in manufacturing, but safety incidents, the quality or the defects in the production, you can see the turnover rates drop. Overall customer satisfaction is higher, productivity is higher, profitability is higher. So this is important, the effect your employees have on customer engagement, right? Employees that are engaged customers. So let's look again at our entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial employee worksheet and grade your organization. So again, 1 means that this is not true, 10 means it's true for every employee in your organization. Does every one of your employees have a service mentality? Is the best part of their day interacting with customers? Do they see every one of those interactions as an opportunity to make a difference in that customer's day? Do they freely admit their mistakes and focus on making it right rather than pointing fingers? Do they suggest systems or processes overall for the company that make make certain that those same mistakes never happen again? Where do you fall on that scale? Myth 3, high performers don't need motivation. So remember those 30% who are actively engaged, the ones that are still actively engaged? Those are your high performers, right? They motivate themselves, but they can become dissatisfied if they're not engaged on a personal level. They don't feel challenged. So here's another interesting note. Low performers, those folks that are not necessarily producing for us, can actually be more engaged than middle or high performers. So when you do just a standard survey, for example, they can actually show up as being more engaged because it actually takes less for them to feel challenged, right? They're not. It takes a smaller workload. It takes smaller responsibilities for them to feel challenged. So recently, we were contacted by a company who was alarmed that their best salespeople were leaving. To make matters worse, the exit interview showed that they weren't actually leaving for more money. So after an analysis of the remaining staff, we realized that the best salespeople that they had in the organization, and this is fairly common with a lot of companies, the best salespeople had been promoted. And they found their new role boring. They didn't feel challenged without day-to-day contact with customers. And worse yet, they were really no longer in control of their commissions or their share of the commissions. So they became demotivated and moved. They moved into roles that they were more comfortable with, if you will. So which actually brings me to the next myth, which is my managers know how to engage employees. A lot of business leaders assume that if they're management material, they know how to engage employees. If you think this, I challenge you to bring in someone, a disinterested third party, and interview these managers. Seated across from you as a leader in the organization, they'll tell you what they think you want to hear, right? But when they've been guaranteed anonymity, the real truth comes out. 26% of the managers we've worked with felt completely unprepared to transition into management roles. 58% of them did not receive any training of any sort. One of our small manufacturing clients saw this have a domino effect on their employee engagement and then overall their customer experience. The managers quickly became discouraged and disengaged, resulting in their team members becoming disengaged as well. So according to a Towers Watson Global Workforce study, if any of you have seen this, they polled about 32,000 employees, I think, across the globe. An employee's immediate supervisory relationship ranked fourth as a predictor of engagement, along with leadership, stress and workload, goals, those kinds of things that we've already talked about. Once an employee was disengaged, customer complaints went through the roof, and attrition began really with their third largest customer really deciding to put their account into review, which was kind of a scary thing. They eventually did win that review, but it was a very stressful kind of thing that occurred. But even the best athletes in the world will tell you that they're always learning, they're always practicing. So that's why, for example, our trainings focus on creating real life scenarios and usages rather than teaching theory. We don't just teach theory. In fact, only 10% of our trainings are in the classroom. So that brings us to myth number 5. This is one that I have experienced myself. Young folks are more disengaged and harder to reach, right? Back when I founded my first company, I used to say, I can't get younger people to have a sense of urgency. They have no sense of urgency. By the way, these folks are called millennials. I don't know if you've heard that term by the media. But here's the truth. Millennials are actually more eager to commit to organizations than other generations, if that organization has the same values. Their workplace concerns overall are working for a manager that they can respect and learn from, working with people that they like, and having that work-life balance. Excuse me. So that's they can become more engaged if they're approached slightly differently than even other generations. They want a manager who's supportive and skillful, but also more understanding, more open-minded, easy to get along with. Something else Daniel Pink once actually said to me when I met him that really rings true. This is a generation that's the first to have come of age in the information age, right? So when they need feedback or information, it's always been at the tip of their fingertips, or a text message away. Then we throw them into the job world where we have these kind of traditional practices where they get feedback once a year during their review, right? So you might, if you have employees of this generation, you might consider offering monthly check-ins, or better yet, offer them some sort of feedback on a regular basis every week or so. So let's talk about how to more effectively measure your own employee engagement. I'm not sure how many of you send out an employee engagement survey. We recently have had a client with multiple locations in the Midwest. They traditionally did an employee engagement survey every year. But last year, they suddenly began to see issues. Productivity and sales dropped. Infighting was prevalent. Deadlines were missed. Clients were not happy overall. So they began to ask some probing questions. But the employees were saying everything was great. All the examples that they gave were great. It all made sense. But this is obviously not the case. So they brought us in to figure out the issue. The first thing we did was implement our version of the employee engagement survey, our version of the employee engagement survey. Everything seemed normal except for one of the last questions. When asked if they saw themselves with the company in 2 years, 52% of them answered no. I mean, the leaders of this company were stunned. 52, more than half, slightly more than half, didn't see themselves with the company in 2 years. So after our follow-up interview process, they were able to enact strategies to turn that around, that lack of engagement, because they had more accurate answers overall. But so sometimes having a third party, an administrator or something like this, gets you closer to the truth. For everyone on this call, by the way, we'll actually administer an online survey to your organization. The way this works is that we you give us your email database, and we give you an email to send out to the whole organization, just giving them a heads up about what's going on. If this is a third party, please answer honestly, because we don't know who's answering or what your answers are. And then we send the survey out. They do it online anonymously. But for the folks that are on this call today, we'll actually do this for you for free. This gives you a starting point on your own employee engagement journey overall. It's a good start, but we also believe that traditional employee engagement surveys on their own can be a bit misleading, because employees assume that management is doing the survey and will somehow know it's their answer, right? Plus, traditional surveys really can't measure commitment. And the employee's commitment to a company's mission, basically it's measured in terms of how much discretionary effort are your employees willing to invest for the success of the company, or how your employees align their own personal success with the overall success of your organization. So not many employees will answer a question like, how much discretionary effort are you willing to invest in the success of your company? They won't answer that honestly, right? So that's why the employee satisfaction feedback processes we've developed, they actually focus less on the subjective definition of satisfied and more on uncovering employee frustrations, their joys, their unique insights into your company. After all, if you ask a person what's wrong, they'll tell you what's wrong, right? They won't tell you what's right. So with that client of ours that had the 52% of employees who wanted to leave, we began to ask things like what motivates them. You know, just by asking, it was motivating. By implementing employee engagement conversation, it creates a culture of caring. Just by actually taking the step, it tells them that their input is value. It provides unique perspectives for creating new efficiencies. But we found out things like how they feel, what they need, what they say, what their level of trust is with management, the influences that they have, and overall their emotional intelligence, which is a kind of a common thing that's occurring now, but understanding how they handle a lot of the situations emotionally that arise. And then also the processes versus the organizational habits, right? So every organization has processes for getting something done, and then occasionally they have an organizational habit. So there's one way to get it done, and then there's the real way that you get it done. And it'll help uncover those so that you're getting consistency across the board. So let's take a look at another question here. For your organization, does every employee possess a remarkable multitasking ability? Do they possess that ability? Are they flexible, or do they gladly accept new duties, assignments, responsibilities? Do they prioritize them? Do your employees often perform more than just one role, even if it's for a short period of time until you fill that role? Are they always willing to kind of dig in and do any type of work? So in other words, they don't feel that anything is beneath them. How does your organization grade on that? All right, so how do we attract, hire, and retain top talent? It really requires a culture of employee engagement. Changing a culture requires a commitment by leadership, right? So really, success depends on the same thing any successful corporate endeavor requires. It depends on your employees. When your employees talk about what a great place it is to work, it really becomes your strongest recruitment tool. If you provide a great culture to work in, you'll retain people. If you understand what motivates and drives their employees, they'll share their story. They'll share things that happen on their social media, and they'll actually recruit friends and acquaintances that share those values overall. So before we jump into this section, though, what about your people? What kind of energy and enthusiasm are they putting toward their work? So on a scale of 1 to 10, is energy a trademark of your entire staff? Do they have those kind of contagious and high levels of enthusiasm and energy? Are they consistently generating output that's higher than you'd expect? Do they feel that they're an integral part of the company's overall success? Do they perform effectively with limited supervision? That's an interesting one because I own my own company, so I know exactly how that works within organizations. Are they self-motivated? Do they set their own internal priorities with minimal guidance overall? So we leverage the same tools we use when mapping the customer experience journey. We have a conversation to gain understanding, we get their buy-in, and we execute efficiently on the tools that we put in place. However, just like your customers don't expect extreme customer experiences, employees don't necessarily expect those kind of Google-inspired perks like a pool table and in-house chefs, and I mean, all that stuff is great, but employees don't necessarily expect that. So here's what they do expect. They do expect to be proud of their workplace, right? How that happens is basically the company has a purpose, or they have a purpose within that company, and you've created this kind of entrepreneurial culture. I met a young woman at a networking event recently. I asked her what she did. She spent the next several moments telling me about what a great company she worked for, the role that she played in growing the company, how well they treated their employees, this training that she got to do, and I think it was Boston. I was so enthralled that I didn't even notice that she still hadn't even told me what she did. I didn't even know what this company did, but what a great company to work for, right? So I wanted to know more about her employer. Imagine if your employees were talking about you in that manner. On the other side of the coin, the financial industry right now is struggling to find and hire great employees, especially in the mortgage industry. Not because the pay isn't good, but because of the changing values of employees. Many of these employees do not want to be associated with the industry that they perceive to have created the economic spin-out of 2008, which is kind of fascinating to me. And then, employees love involvement in the community as well. It gives them something to be proud of. In addition to kind of our own corporate purpose, the financials, the way that we treat customers, those kinds of things, we actually currently give our own employees 2 days paid time off a year to do something that gives back to the community. We require them to share their experience with the whole team, and because of that, everyone gets to hear the stories, right? In fact, when I interview new team members, which I do on a fairly regular basis, I ask them how they became interested in us. The number one answer is this purpose-driven perk that we offer. Oh, we heard that you do this paid time off to do charity work, or however they word it. So it's really kind of an interesting practice. They want a challenging environment. They want to be challenged. Challenging tasks and an opportunity to grow. It's not enough to provide more challenging roles. They have to be kind of aligned with what the employee finds valuable, which we discover in initial conversations with them, right? One of the first things that we often hear from our new clients is, I don't want to train someone for their next job, right? In fact, this was kind of an interesting thing I saw on LinkedIn recently. If we train them to leave for better jobs, CFO asked the CEO, what happens if we spend all this money for training and our employees decide to leave? And the CEO challenges back, what happens if we don't and they stay? Kind of an interesting thought. But overall, according to Corporate Leadership Council, in a survey of 50,000 employees, they're 87% less likely to seek other employment if they're engaged where they are. They're just not looking, right? So, here's what we've seen. You're really training them for their next job, but for their next job in your organization. Because over and over, our clients have seen that when they challenge their employees and encourage them to challenge their own leadership, employees actually feel part of the organization. If they feel part of the organization, they're very hesitant to go someplace else and have to start over. Because that's one thing that you can't necessarily see through social media, through the transparency that I talked about, is how hard am I going to have to work to get to the position that I'm in now, as far as the value of my role within this organization. And really, those incremental pay raises aren't enough to get them to switch either. So let's think about your employees. Do all of your employees possess that that growth potential, if you will? So where do you score on this? When you think about your employees, do they actually possess the potential to want to learn, to want to grow, those kinds of things? And how do you grade on that scale? They also expect the right tools. They don't want to be too challenged. I mean, they like to be challenged, but they want to have the tools in place. So remember the story I told you of the company with the top salespeople who were leaving. One of the steps that they skipped in that transition was training. So they didn't provide adequate leadership and management training. They didn't provide those employees the tools they needed to be successful. So they changed that practice and found that something amazing happened. The promoted individuals, the ones who were still there that hadn't left, actually found that their new goals were a new challenge. It was something that they hadn't done before. So even though they weren't in their traditional sales roles anymore, they felt like they were growing and achieving new things, and they were overall more engaged. And create a feedback culture. Don't wait for the one-year review. Give feedback constantly and request feedback in return. It's important. In addition to touching base from time to time, also provide anonymous feedback as a mechanism as well. This allows employees to be more honest in their answers. Publicly reward the right behaviors so coworkers begin to understand their role and how their role is moving the company toward their goals. Offer suggestions for areas of improvement, but always start and end with a positive if at all possible. So before we talk about employee accountability and how to create engaged employees, let's look at your company again. What do you see your employees doing? So are they talking about being team players, or are they demonstrating it? Are they talking the talk, or are they walking the walk? Do they recognize how their individual role contributes to the overall efforts of their coworkers and also the success of the organization? So the activities that they're partaking in, do they understand how that relates to the overall success? Do they accept accountability as a creative challenge of their position? So if they've got goals to hit, do they see that as a creative challenge? They recognize these roles and contributions of their teammates. And do they highlight those contributions whenever that's appropriate? And then how about the customer? Do they see the customer as a critical role in their team? Because it is. The customer is a critical role. So before we talk about the 5 steps to create an entrepreneurial or an intrapreneurial organization, if you will, let's preface it with the fact that organizational trust is key to success. So what does that mean? What's organizational trust? Employees don't trust management. Surprise! It's really that simple. According to author Stephen M.R. Covey's book, The Speed of Trust, only 51% of employees trust senior management, and only 28% believe that CEOs are a credible source of information. So if team members don't trust management and each other, you'll fail. Covey calls it the kind of a hidden tax on every transaction, every communication, every interaction, every strategy, every decision really is taxed. It brings speed down and it sends costs up. And my own experience within my own companies, that significant distrust doubles the cost of doing business, and it almost triples the time that it takes to get things done. But establishing trust can be taught. Since we'd really like for you all that are on this call to try out our training programs, we're making a special offer to those of you who joined us today. For all of you in the webinar, we're making our Establishing Trust program or training program available to your team, free of charge. Your managers, your employers, whomever you'd like to invite. We've seen our leadership training models be so successful for so many companies that we really want to show you how they can be successful for you today. And this is a great way since this is the beginning of this process, it's a great way to start. And we'll provide it to you free of charge. Just contact me and we'll make that happen. So here are the 5 steps. First one, we talked about this earlier, understand. Remember, for best results, this only starts with that survey, right? We have to have conversations as well. You have to have conversations. And like I said, we'll do that survey to give you a starting point so that you kind of know where to move from there. It'll give you a map for starting your own employee engagement process, right? But those measurements, those kind of numbers that come back, really only give you a benchmark. You must then really ask those in-depth questions that uncover their personal goals, their motivations, the obstacles they feel stand in their way, whether they're real obstacles or just perceived obstacles. That emotional intelligence we talked about, how do they perceive, control, and evaluate the emotions of their supervisors and their coworkers. Many psychologists they feel that this is really more important than IQ, their emotional intelligence. And again, this will give you a glimpse into those organizational habits that we talked about. There are corporate policies and processes, the way things are supposed to be done, and there's organizational habits, the way they really get done. We evaluated a company a few years ago that had two partners. So one partner established processes in the hopes of systemizing tasks and making everything consistent. But if the process felt cumbersome for the employees, rather than the employees making suggestions to streamline it, the employees would actually simply go to the other partner who would just do the work for them. He would just take care of it. And this really created a bottleneck of efficiency overall. So once you understand how they function within your organization, then you have to show them how this aligns with corporate vision and strategy. So step two is giving them a purpose. And really the only way to create accountability is to create buy-in. Too often leaders use these kind of financial goals we talked about to motivate people, but employees say that they don't get out of the bed in the morning to achieve financial objectives, right? They go to help their coworkers. They go to achieve a mission. They want to be inspired by a sense of doing something important for the organization, something that makes a difference. So, you know, the best executives focus on creating shared values. If an employee feels that they're a part of a bigger mission that aligns with their values, they'll adopt your mission as their own. If done correctly, these conversations you have in step one can really creatively be leveraged to show them how their values and personal goals align with the company's values and goals. Sometimes it takes some creativity, but for the most part, there are always goals in there that align. It's important to communicate a clear strategy and goals for the organization to make this happen. You know, they have to be simple but very clear written expectations of each employee's performance. And then each of these are rationalized on how these actions contribute to the overall success of the company. And make sure it's clear that these expectations result in performance-based compensation for the individuals and their coworkers. So, you know, employees, and especially good employees, are motivated by challenges. But if you give them rewards based on whether or not they're hitting these performance goals, it works really well. And sometimes those can be monetary. We found that there are other ways that work just as well. Create frameworks and not rules. Nordstrom kind of offers their empowering rule for customer experience overall. Use best judgment in all situations. There will be no additional rules. So of course, Nordstrom has an employee manual and training programs and other set processes, but they've established a framework that allows associates to adapt in the face of challenges. When they're forced to deviate from a set course, you know, objective strengths, problems, challenges, customer emotions are unique in every customer. So enabling your employees to make instant decisions allows them to use their own intuition and creativity. Sometimes they're the right decisions, sometimes not so much. But if we've instilled that what our goal is overall, you can trust that the right decisions will outweigh the wrong ones. So how about your employees? Are they results oriented? I think we talked about this earlier. Do they take ownership, get tasks done? Do they demonstrate common sense in decisions and actions, especially in interactions with customers? Or do they have to come to you for virtually every decision? Are they able to resolve problems that could slow down typical employees? Just keep in mind that some people won't fit, right? And this is the hard part. Sometimes you just have to cut your losses. We've had to help our clients let employees go that have been with them for years, not because they weren't talented, but because they just simply couldn't fit the new culture of productivity. Disgruntled employees alternatives to, you can try to provide these solutions and alternatives to these employees, giving them a means to a change, but be prepared to cut these malcontents loose, even if they're superstars. Recently, we had to help some folks cut a top salesperson, because the salesperson, he was great, but he just had a self-serving attitude. They were really terrified that their sales would dip. What happened was really, instead, was remarkable. The other sales folks kind of stepped into the void. When I later asked them why, the employees why, they said it was because they used to have to do so many things for him that they now have time to focus on their own goals. A bad employee will cost you more in lost productivity and dysfunctional teamwork than it will earn you in revenues. Our accounting firm recently showed me a monetary representation of this. They measure employee efficiency as well, as well as help us measure it. But they showed us how in 1 year their efficiency rating during their busiest time, which for an accounting firm is tax time, was miserably low. They identified the cause. A new employee who was seasoned, so he was doing things the way he had always done them at past firms, right? He basically was slowing things down because the other employees found themselves correcting for his violations and processes. He was let go on a Friday, and within a week, the employee efficiency numbers had doubled. Step 3, lead. We're all in the people business. No matter what you're selling or building or making or putting out there, it's as simple as that. We're in the people business. The people who buy from us and the people who work with us. As leaders, your most important role is to be a performance coach. Offer every employee easy access to you for coaching. Give them frequent and accurate and specific feedback about their strengths over weaknesses, and always based on the goals, how their goals can help the company achieve the company's goals. This doesn't have to be unwieldy. You just need to provide the tools and individual direction for employees to define and solve day-to-day problems. For example, we ask our employees to approach every decision they need guidance in this manner. Give me a brief overview of the situation, tell me 3 solutions, and tell me which one you recommend and why. This dramatically streamlines the decision process, but more importantly, it teaches them how to problem solve within the framework of our company goals. As a leader, be personal, open, honest, transparent with communications. Face-to-face should always win out over emails. Create legacies by sharing stories and knowledge. You'll notice when we do these webinars, we share stories, we share kind of experiences. I'm a member of a peer group called Entrepreneurs Organization, kind of like having a board made up of business founders, except they don't really provide me with advice. They share experiences and stories that I can relate to my own company. When you create these stories within your organization, you create a common connection for your entire team. You give your employees a foundation for the why the company does what it does. And they'll share those stories on a regular basis with customers, employees, employee prospects, friends, neighbors, relatives. In fact, sharing these stories is also really powerful when used in sales. Our next seminar that's coming up is called Story Selling, how to close more sales through the power of customer experience stories. We'll give you a peek into our unique sales training so your sales team can adapt their current technique for today's multi-channel world. You'll learn how this experience sharing actually drives sales and creates stronger customer bonds. So strong, actually, that many of our clients rarely participate in RFP processes anymore. They're really the only ones that are invited to the party. Step 4, develop. I cannot emphasize this enough. Every employee should have a learning goal and their personal objectives. And you should provide regular trainings and encourage the commitment that's needed to achieve that learning goal. Today, that's easier than ever with technology. We have a social learning platform that provides our clients a place for employees to visit for ongoing training, making this really affordable for large groups, especially with standardized tasks. If you don't have a formal training program, you really need one right away. If your employees don't feel like they're challenged and growing, they will seek that out, maybe with your competitors. Yes, they need to be trained in their own role, but consider leadership training for those who show a talent for motivating their coworkers. Train employees to trust. Train them on how to work more efficiently as a team. This cannot be a one-time training. You have to provide them real-world scenarios and real-world capabilities to try these things out. new talents take practice, right? Our trainings, and I talk about this, we use the 70-20-10 adult learning model, where really only 10% of the learning is a formal setting, 20% is learned through exposure to coaching, feedback, and coworker implementation, and 70% of their learning is applied through real-world scenarios. Allow those great employees to take a lead, even if they're not officially leaders. Pair them with other coworkers, empower them to mentor new workers. Give employees something to take pride in, too. Empower employees to make decisions needed to solve problems, including making mistakes. Don't punish for mistakes. Instead, ask them to develop a process or a plan of action to make sure, when they made a mistake, to make sure that mistake doesn't happen again. And then have them share that experience with their coworkers. And then the final step, of course, is to reward. By investing every employee in your goals, you're giving them a sense of pride in doing it well. It also gives them an opportunity to work together. So give them incentives to encourage cooperation and positive peer pressure. Set daily, weekly, quarterly goals for your teams that can, so that they can kind of turn everyday tasks, if you will, into team-based games. Who can manufacture the most products, error-free, of course. Don't have to make them product free, but as fast as they can. Who can generate the most leads or sell the most insurance policies? Who can garner the most customer experience accolades? Give away prizes, but more importantly, establish a weekly recognition meeting for everyone to celebrate these wins. But reward more than financial. Reward more than those financial goals. Reward positive behaviors like flexibility, innovation, those customer experience wins, developing new processes, those kinds of things. And don't make the rewards all financial either. This creates an expectation that really grows with every reward. Instead, consider creative rewards that generate internal buzz. I serve on the board of Connections to Success. It's a not-for-profit. They have a weekly or monthly, you can subscribe either way, for companies, and we do this, where they deliver a tray of these amazing baked goods that are baked with their employees, who are formerly impoverished folks that they now have trained in a skill. And they deliver this tray, and it's got a placard in it that says what the employee did. So all day, people stop by their desk and read about why this employee was rewarded, what they did that resulted in this weekly reward or monthly reward. So you talk about reinforcing good behavior by talking about it over a plate of brownies, right? So if anyone's interested in that program, let me know. I'll introduce you to them. It goes to a good cause. It reinforces great employee practices. We offer a mock-up of the Monopoly Get Out of Jail Free card. We hand those out regularly. It entitles the employee to a day off. We also have what we call the patio pass. And this comes from Cameron Harold. It actually was his idea, but he's a speaker as well. But it gives the entire team the afternoon. So if a team has been successful, it gives them the afternoon off to enjoy a libation on a local patio when the weather's nice. So hopefully this has given you some ideas on how to develop your own culture into an engaging culture. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. And don't forget, for you all, on this webinar, we're offering 2 exclusive tools to help you get started: our free employee engagement assessment and our free introductory establishing trust training. If you're interested in them, please feel free to email me. And also, if you're interested in those employee appreciation baked good platters, I'll introduce you to Connections to Success as well. So that's it. I guess we'll open it for questions now.
Hey, Jeff, Brian here. We're a little close to the end of the hour, but we got time for a few questions, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
I'm going to hit this one first. This is from Beth, and she says her organization is in desperate need of a culture change, but management has been resistant. Do you have any suggestions about how to convince them that that sort of change is necessary?
The best way that we've seen is to develop that employee engagement, that survey, send that survey out, because that report comes back and it shows you where people lie on this engagement scale. It shows you those kinds of things. Another great way is to use that worksheet that I offered for download. That's a great way to sit down with leaders or managers, or just to pass on to them and say, hey, these are some things that drive an entrepreneurial organization, and so maybe these are things that we should be looking into.
Great. You know, kind of along the same lines here, Trey is asking, how can I identify the actively disengaged, you know, that 18% that really drags everything down?
Well, again, you'll see them, you know, they'll spend a lot of time out of the office. You'll see them, they spend a lot of time kind of doing things that we would call lazing off. But more importantly, they'll actually do things that create team chaos. They will, instead of solving problems, they raise issues a lot of times. They really don't necessarily want to work towards solutions. They would rather just, you know, throw wrenches into the process. But there are a lot of different ways to identify those. And again, that's why we always, you know, even though we do the survey, we always follow it up with additional questions. In fact, we borrowed this question from an organization called Tiny Pulse, but we even asked questions like, tell us how satisfied, when we do the one-on-one interviews, how satisfied are you with the snacks in the break room? It seems like kind of an absurd question, but what it does is it starts this dialogue where they start to talk about the reasons that they're disengaged without even knowing that they're doing it.
Interesting. Okay. And by the way, if anybody does have a question that they want to ask, you can just use the question panel right there on the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll address those here shortly. I got one here from Kevin, and he says, how do I walk that fine line between providing constant feedback while also avoiding micromanagement?
Well, yeah, they're definitely two different things, and they can be perceived as micromanagement. But again, I think if we establish the goals, it's all driven by goals. It's all driven by what the organizational goals are and what the individual's goals are that lead to those organizational goals. So providing feedback, as long as you keep the conversation about the goals and not necessarily about how they're getting to the goals, then it becomes more about you know, either accolades or information on how they might be able to do things better, differently than it does about here's how you should be doing it. Here's how you, and that is more of a micromanager type of feel.
Gotcha. Let's see. Here's another one from Dana, and this is in reference to the story about the salesmen that were promoted kind of above their engagement level. How do we avoid promoting staff above their, you know, maximum effectiveness or their engagement level?
You know, we typically try to, we start off with identifying those, we coach leaders on how to identify those employees who have potential for management and not necessarily just, you know, potential for likability, because there's a difference. There, you know, a lot of companies, if an employee is likable, then and they're effective at their job, then they get promoted. Because it's assumed that if they're likable, people will follow them, and that's not necessarily the case. We always start off with, we also have we do a lot of assessments that give us a starting point, but we have a management aptitude assessment that we do that kind of gives us a feel for whether or not they're ready to take on that leadership role.
Great. And you know, we're kind of at the top of the hour here. I know everybody's time is valuable. Terry was asking about getting a copy of the presentation. That's going to be available on your website. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I'd be happy, Terry, to email that to you. No problem.
Excellent.
And I see another question from Terry.
Yeah, she says, how do you handle those in management positions who push down future? Sorry, my screen kind of cut it off. Can you read it? Who push down future leaders because of their own agenda to be promoted?
So that one's a tough one, and what ends up happening is that the bad always tends to overwhelm the good. Negative tends to override. So a lot of times, and again, I'm not sure where Terry is speaking from, like what position she's in, if she's below this person or above this person. As a leader, we actually provide coaching for this as well, but as a leader, there are certain things that you should look for within people who could possibly be within management, that could drive management, and then we would do those assessments overall. If you're underneath this person, that's where we get a lot of those disengaged employees, because what ends up happening is that whoever your supervisor is will really drive whether or not you stay or you leave an organization. And sometimes it's better to leave. But as an organization, we want to make sure that the people who are in management positions are not running their own personal agenda. And the best way to do that is to have those goals set that are driven by company goals. So in other words, we identify what their personal values and their personal goals are, but we really want to creatively tie that to how their values can drive value for the organization.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up here, I'd just like to let everybody know about Jeff's next upcoming webinar on July 9th, entitled Story Selling. And in that webinar, you're going to get a peek at the Mosconi Group sales training for a multi-channel world and learn the basics of how to close more sales through the power of customer experience sharing. Jeff will be covering topics like why most marketing doesn't work, one method to becoming a preferred vendor and leaving the RFP behind, why your prospects don't care what you're selling, why relationship selling is dead or why it should be, and 3 practices that will improve your sales revenues. So I hope that everybody will join us on that webinar as well, and you can sign up on mosconigroup.com. I'd like to thank everyone for their time today, and Jeff, I'd like to thank you for the presentation.
All right, great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Have a great afternoon.